Strong bodies,
kind hearts,
unstoppable minds.
You're listening to Strong Girls Pod,
where strong women share their stories
to inspire strong girls.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Strong Girls Pod. As always, I'm your host, Charlie Ekstrom, and I am here with three-time Olympian for 2012 and 2016 track and field, and 2018 decided to go dual season Olympian, competed in the bobsled where you won a bronze medal, Miss Phylicia George. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Charlie, for having me.
I'm so excited to really talk about your journey, and I'm so excited for everybody listening to just hear about it all, because I think it's a pretty phenomenal thing, not only to be a three-time Olympian, that's pretty phenomenal, but to also do it in multiple sports. I just really can't wait to dive into your journey. It's going to be awesome.
Awesome.
Well, to start us off here, I'm wondering, Phylicia, if you could give us a little bit about your background and your story. I want to hear about your careers, plural now, spanning through why you chose the sports you've done, what you've played and grown up doing. I want to hear the story. Let's hear your background.
All the things.
All the things.
So, I feel like I've had such a love affair with running. I started racing my dad in parking lots. You're kind of that little kid, I'll race you to the car. In elementary school, we had play day, and I found out I was the fastest kid in elementary school. I was beating all of the boys, and just had everybody really telling me wow, you're so amazing at running. I really think you should get a coach. And I never really took it seriously until I ended up going to high school. And my first year in high school, I got my awakening of maybe I'm not as amazing as I think I am. And the idea around training really got planted into my head. And so I remember I was driving past York University, which is where the indoor track is in Toronto, where I'm from. And I was to my dad, can we go in and find me a track coach? Just literally, let's just walk in and see what can happen. And I ended up meeting my coach that day. I, joined the track club. I started training 5 days a week. And that's really kind of where my journey started and started to take off. I ended up getting a full athletic scholarship to go to the University of Connecticut. I studied biological sciences. At the time, I had a dream of becoming a doctor as well. And my dad's a teacher, so it was really important to have great academics. And just kind of chipped away a little bit at a time. I wasn't really the superstar necessarily in university. I was never an All-American, but I just had this fire inside of me that really believed that I could do it. And I ended up graduating. And then in my first year out, I had this breakout year. I had everybody doubting me at that time, but then I just decided to go for it. And I ended up making my first World Championships. The year after that, I made my first Olympic team. I came fifth at the Olympics. My second Olympics was in Rio, where I finished 8th. And after that, that's when I was recruited to do bobsleigh. And so initially I said, no, there's no way, I don't even want to do this. I'm top 8 in the world in track and field. Why would I shift? Why would I do something else? But then just the idea of challenging myself in a whole new way, I just couldn't get that out of my head. And I'm kind of known as a risk taker. I'm known as doing crazy things. And so I was fine. I was living in Louisiana at the time. I packed up all my stuff. I put it in storage. I moved to Calgary and was okay, I'm going to try to make a Winter Olympics. And then within 6 months, I, learned how to push a bobsled. I made the team, and then ended up winning a bronze medal. And that's me.
I love it. I'm beaming ear to ear. Every time you're well, I figured might as well try it. I think it's so awesome. And I love the way that your eyes got big as you were talking about just the fire in you.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's so incredible of I wasn't done yet. There was a fire burning in me that said that I wanted to do this. I think looking at you've had a long career in sport, and you've had a long career through multiple sports, but you've had this fire that originated with running for you. What do you feel was your defining foundation to kind of enable you to continue to have that fire and be able to push that beyond? You said that you've always liked to do challenging things. Where does that fire originate from, do you think? Do you think that comes from with your dad, with racing him? Or I want to hear more. Let's dive in more.
Yeah, I think I just always had this idea of trying to be the best that I could be. And I mean, I was a straight A student. Like I excelled at all these sports. I was joining all these groups in high school. And to me, I just feel like life is so full. And so I was always like, how can I maximize? How can I be the absolute best that I can be? So I think it was a little bit of that idea around like, there's something really beautiful about trying really hard at something and then achieving it. I think early on, I realized that. For me with running as well, though, I'm a very like feeling based person. And my initial feelings with running felt like freedom to me. Like that's the space where I was in. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel free here, where it's just like, it's the purest expression of myself. And so I think I was always searching for that. How can I find this feeling more and more and more? And so, you know, when you train really hard and you get really good at doing something, there's always this moment or this time frame where things just start to feel effortless. And I think I started to just fall in love with that feeling. And so I got really good at being willing to prepare, being willing to work really hard, because I knew that if I did, I would perfect my skills to the point where I could feel that feeling of freedom and effortlessness. And so I think it was a little bit of that, like understanding the feelings of joy that I had inside of myself, and then just being willing to do what I needed to do to get there. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. It's like putting in all the work in order to get to that state of effortlessness, to where it's like, it's almost additionally rewarding when you get to that feeling of effortlessness, but you know the amount of effort that went into it to start. It's that extra reward that pushes you forward even further. It's a goosebump giver.
I should have said this before, but watching the 96 Olympics was kind of where my like dream of going to the Olympics started. And the image that I have in my mind that stands out is Donovan Bailey. He won the 100 meters. He's a Canadian. He crossed the finish line. He screams in elation. It's just like this like raw emotion coming out of him. And I always remember like, I just really want that feeling of like being so confident in who I am and feeling that feeling of victory. And then in my process through bobsleigh, halfway through, I was like, I'm going to quit. This is terrible. I hate this. I wasn't even like competing because I was a spare. And, you know, something, again, that fire came in and was like, no, you said you're going to do this, like stick with this and see it through. And then I remember when I got out the sled and I realized we won a bronze medal, I started to cry. And it was just that exact same feeling of like, just this raw emotion coming out of me. So one, it was the victory, but the other part of it was I wanted to quit. I thought that I couldn't do it. And I chose to stick with it. I chose to like bet on myself. So that feeling of like choosing yourself and then seeing what you are capable of, I think is really beautiful as well.
Oh, wow. The raw emotions, I'm like, I'm going to almost get a tear to my eye just thinking about that, of having like every ounce of energy and time and effort that you put into it, all of the lows, like all kind of coming together at that end there. It's something phenomenal. And you stepped out of the sled realizing that you'd won a bronze medal. And I feel like there had to be a similar feeling too on track. You have made a final in every event that you've ever competed in the Olympics, which is an incredible feat nonetheless. Like you've been a top 8 track athlete in the world for your entire Olympic career, and then go and earn a medal, and knowing like you've made a final in every single time that you've competed, like the specialty and the feeling, like the reward that must come from, because of the fact that you said like there were not always easy moments in track. You didn't say it always came easy. Like it was easy. You were really fast as a kid, but that didn't make you the All-American in college. That didn't make you the best of the best of the best immediately. You had to put in the work to become one of the best of the best. And so knowing those things and going as far as you did just becomes that much more special. It adds to that weight of emotions after.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think about my first Olympics. I actually feel like that moment for me was kind of when I made my first final. So when I ran in the semifinals and I finished, and then you look up on the screen, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going. I think I'm going to get emotional here. Like I'm going to the finals. Like, and my first Olympics, I think, was the most impactful because obviously it's your first, and you had this dream as a kid, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I really did it. You know, that for me was really that moment of like really realizing I made a childhood dream come true. and just the work that it took to get there. Because really, in 2012, 2 years prior, I had people telling me that I should quit track and field, that I should move on, that I'll never make a team. And again, I keep talking about my fire, and I almost kind of personify her because she kind of became a little bit of like my alter ego on the track as well. But I'm such a firm believer in self-belief and self-confidence and letting, your achievements be driven from inside of you. And I think that makes what you do so much more impactful. And I also believe that when you are being driven by your inner fire, other people are going to reap the benefits of that as well. And so, I'm always encouraging people to do the thing that is really meaningful to you. And you will also be serving your community and contributing to other people as well.
Yeah, it's duly motivating. It's motivating internally and externally. It gives you that fire to compete. It gives you that internal desire, but then the benefits that not only you, but everybody around you get to reap from the fact that you've got that fire and that passion, have only been able to elevate and take you further.
For sure.
Oh, I love
that.
Got
here for real. Oh my God.
I know. I'm literally I'm kind of sucking them in right now for a second, trying to not get super welled up because I'm thinking back to what you were saying in 2012. You look up and your name is there for the final, and that's everything that anybody's ever told you to not do it. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I am here. Mm-hmm. I am going and I am competing at an Olympic final at my first Olympics.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's to not put shame on the other Olympic journeys that you had, but there's no way that first final didn't inspire your career for the future times. And every future time you're I want that feeling again. That feeling of 2012, I'm chasing as I'm going into these next Olympics. I know what this is like. I know that I deserve to be here now, but I also know how special that feeling is once you've earned it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think your first time is kind of always the most special time because, it has the novelty of it. I was in a stadium with 80,000 people, which was oh my gosh, the energy was so electric. But I think the biggest thing is just realizing that I just didn't give up on myself. And I had a lot of opportunities and chances too.
What's so special about this too is just your journey. I love how much of the underdog mentality you've had and how much of an underdog journey it's really been. And so, like you were saying, it's not really about the fact that you made that final, but it's about the fact that you had those feelings going in of I have something to prove, and you're proving it in that moment. It's so much more about the fact that you've been able to achieve what you've been able to do, what you set your mind out to do, than what the actual results was, which I think is so special that you've highlighted so much in your career and what this journey has meant to you. I love it.
Yeah. Again, like I said, I really believe in believing in yourself. And I believe that can be the fire to really fuel you. And I think when you're motivated internally, it really doesn't really matter what outside people are saying, but you're kind of I guess I kind of learned how to use that as fuel to on my journey, where there's always going to be somebody doubting you. There's always going to be somebody better than you. There's always going to be something that isn't exactly going the way you want to. But I guess I also learned how to, and I have a quote that I kind of say is let the space in between inspire you. And just this idea around where I am and where I want to be, instead of letting that be a challenge or a hurdle, pun intended, it's an inspiration, it's motivation. And even I remember, going to UConn for the first time, and there's these two girls who are now my bestest best friends, and they were just amazing. And I remember being very clear and very aware of the fact that I wasn't as good as them at the time, but I was so motivated by them. I thought they were amazing. I was so inspired by them. And every time I went into practice, it was really this idea around how can I get as close to them as possible? And really understanding that people around you can pull the best out of you. And that's what I started to see competition as. It was me competing against other really great people, other really talented people, and we were all working to pull the best out of each other. So I have to be my best so that you can be your best, and you being your best makes me 10 times better. And so I just really thrived. I think that's why I love the Olympics. It was this idea around I'm standing on the start line with 7 other of the best girls in the whole world, and we're going to see who's the best today. And I just thought that was such an exhilarating feeling, of everybody bringing their best, and seeing what happens.
Just going for it and letting it all go. I think it's something really powerful. Like you said, like you're standing next to 7 of the best like there's 8 of you out there and you're 8 of the best runners in the world. At the final, you are literally the 8 best runners in the world at that given moment. And everybody competing, like you are competing against every nation's best of the best. Like it is a different level. It's a different level beyond college. It's a different level than even competing at Team Canada trials. Like you are now competing against the best of the best of the best. It's like it's just elevating one level further for every level of competition you've gone. I think that with track too, it's something that's so specific. Like you really get to see that elevation where you see it in every sport, but you really get to go like each race, it almost like the competition narrows down. And it goes from your giant pool of, like I was saying, like everybody in college, your giant pool of all collegiate athletes. And then it's like when you get to the collegiate national championships tournament, like you go and race there, and that's the best of all the colleges. But then you go to Team Canada trials and it's really just the best of Canada, which is even more condensed. And then you go to the Olympics and it's the best of the best handful of everybody out there. And so it just becomes more and more specialized, more and more intense. And what I love hearing from you is that is what motivates you even further. You're like, these people around me, like not only am I meant to be here, but these people around me are going to make me faster. So cool.
Yeah. No, it's an amazing feeling. And it's interesting because, like, as you said, it's like it keeps getting more specialized and more specialized. But what I've almost kind of found is the person who gets to that top, we can say top, it's not even necessarily even always the best or the most talented. It's the person who like didn't let the challenge or the like failure stop them. And I think, again, that's why I talk about like my fire is what led me a lot of the times, because I had a lot of moments where I technically should have stopped, or I had a lot of moments where by everything that was on paper, I was not the one or the person who should have continued. But if you have that belief inside of yourself and you just keep going, eventually, to me, that's how I feel, is like you'll eventually get there. The person who's willing to work the hardest, the person who's willing to find the solution, the person who's willing to find a new coach or go move to a different place is a person who's just the one who's going to persevere and continue through it. And I think because most of my teammates in university, again, on paper, were 10 times better than me going in, you know what I mean? But by the time I graduated, I was my captain on my team. And I was probably one of the few who continued on to be an Olympian. And so I guess I may be only just saying that to say it's like, one, I really believe that you get to determine your fate and your destiny if you're the one driving it. And where you are today, again, isn't where you necessarily will be, but you have to understand where you could be. You have to be the one dreaming it and seeing it. And I also say a lot about like your fire is yours. So it's like, it's your responsibility to flame it. It's your responsibility to see it and to know what it is. So that's why I guess I also kind of got to the point where it's like when people doubted me or said I couldn't do it, it was like, well, that's okay because you don't feel my fire. I feel it. And I'm so aware of the fact that I'm going to do this because I can feel it. And somebody outside of me can't feel that. So yeah, just that understanding that your fire is yours for you to own and for you to put into the world. So you got to just keep going with it.
Oh, I love that so much.
Mm-hmm.
It hones back. Like you said it, you determine your own destiny and faith. Anybody who's out there telling you to stop, they don't feel your fire. They're not the ones determining what your destiny and what your faith is. What your fate is. Only you are determining what your future is going to hold. Only you are determining what journey yours is going to be, because again, like you're the one who has the fire. You're the one who's making the decisions. You're the one who's figuring out what your next step in your journey is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Oh, it's so cool. And like, I keep smiling and I'm like, this is just like incredibly empowering to like think about that of it. External factors all aside, at the end of the day, it's what internally is factored in by you. It's you're the one who determines everything at the end of the day.
Yeah. I feel like I'm always trying to put myself in a situation or a place where it's like, how can I empower myself the most? And I guess that's what I also learned through track, or what helped me to get good, was trying to find the creative way of looking at it. And it's funny because I've become very creative and like an artist now, but it's like I found it through sport because I was always trying to use my imagination to help me see the best perspective to make me the most successful. And I think everybody has that opportunity available to them to say, okay, this is the situation. I can think this way or I can think this way. Which way is the most empowering way for me, right? And understand that you have that choice to decide the way you want to view something. And it's like, okay, there's a situation, but you can always choose how you're going to look at it. Choosing the perspective that is the most empowering to you. I'm always playing with things in my mind. Like, how can I twist this? How can I turn it upside down? How can I, like, what other way can I look at this so that this is a positive? It's funny because even on my mirror right here, I have the affirmation written, I'm eternally optimistic. And I think if you're just always willing to see the opportunity or the possibility or the open door for you, you'll find it. Or how, whatever challenge can be a silver lining.
I love it. I think that goes in, even going back to the core origins of what we do at Strong Girls United here. And I think that that's part of why, like, our connection here with one another has been so special, is like you're talking about the tools that you use to continue to allow yourself to stay motivated, to allow yourself to stay driven. And so much of what we do with Strong Girls United is empowering girls through sports, through mentorship, through mental skills training. And so much of your journey has been through mental skills training and training your mind to be that, to have those affirmations. You have them, both external and internal reminders that allow yourself to keep on building, to keep on driving, to keep on moving forward. And what I loved you saying too is that you have found like you found your creative side through your creative pursuit of athletics. And I think that that's something that's so special, because something that people don't realize if you're not as actively engaged in sport, and people who are listening in who are athletes, that like athletics is an artistry in and of itself. And so being able to find those creative outlets that work for you, just the same way that every artist has a different form of expression that works for them, like every athlete has a different form of training, of execution, of all of it that works for them. And it's just how you find your creative side to make yourself perform at the highest level. I loved when you were saying that, like, your artistic and creative side has come out from athletics. It's special.
Yeah, 1,000%. Like, I would have thought, and at least when I started my sporting journey, I would have put those two things at opposite ends of the spectrum, right? I think most people think like that. An athlete is really rigid, really structured, and focused and disciplined, and art is just like this, like, kind of woo-woo space. And man, to so much of being an athlete to me is being instinctual, following your impulses, expression. And I'm also realizing being a great artist is about being focused and disciplined and, making sure you're setting out time to create. And, when I was on the track, let's say if I'm hurdling, I knew I was at my best when I could almost do anything in that moment because I trusted myself so much. Where it's kind of like, okay, if I hit a hurdle, and that's where I think the creativity comes up with, where if I hit a hurdle, I know I can adjust in the moment and find my footing and create what I need to get back to wherever I need to be, as opposed to being where I have to have the steps be, so rigid. And I think, again, initially you need that kind of like over and over trying to do the exact same thing. But when you really start to master it, you get to put your expression in it, and your flow and your mojo, that I like to call. And then it's like, to me, it's like this really beautiful expression of who you are.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think like you hit the nail on the head of like, there is a sense of rigidity, and you do have to have the discipline early to learn the things. But once you become a master is when you get to have that creative flow. I think it's so funny that you were saying like you would have put them into completely different boxes, like early bits and most of your career. I think I was in the exact same category with sport, of where I was an architecture major in undergrad. And so I already had like a really creative outlet when I was studying, when I was doing school. I was like, I always had a creative outlet, but sport was kind of like the rigid sense. And then I realized that I was studying architecture, and there's a huge rigidity of like what works in a building.
Yeah.
But then the older I got in my volleyball career, the more that I realized that there is way less rigidity, especially in beach volleyball, because it's like there's so many elements that we deal with outside of just what the sport gives us. Like the sand could be jumpier, the sand could be deeper, you're moving faster, you're moving slower, you're jumping higher, there's wind, there's rain, there's so many other factors. So you have to be creative. And so, like you saying it there, of yes, learn the skills, master those skills, and then be able to have that creative outlet flow. Like I've really learned, I've always known, because again, I'm an outdoor sport, like there's some elements that I have to deal with and find creative solutions to. But really in the last, I don't even know, probably 2 years, like it's been really recent for me where I've realized even like that my training pattern doesn't need to look the same as everybody else's in order to be able to perform at my highest level. That creative, figure out the thing that works best for you to be able to perform at the highest is really special.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And I think that's what I kind of learned kind of towards the end of my career, that idea around, you know, you got to do what's best for you, and being so like in tune with your body and figuring that out and being creative in your preparation in that kind of way. So yeah, that's awesome.
I love it. And it's so funny because it's for you, like it's been incredibly creative in the fact that you've also had an entire transition into a new sport at an edge, at a later edge of your career. Like you had already competed at 2 Olympics, and then you're like, hey, let's try this on a new sport. I want to hone in on like talking about transitions for you of once you're involved in sport in general and Olympic sport. I want to know what the transition period to a whole new sport was like for you in a whole new season, going out and competing. Like you not only shifted to a new pursuit of a new avenue of sport, but it was a whole new season. It's like you go from a summer sport where you're running outside, where it's warm, usually you're competing in a winter sport in bobsled. Like there are so many avenues and transitions that you made. I would love to know a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, that transition was a little bit crazy. um, I I competed at the 2017 World Championships, and then like took 2 weeks off, and then just ran kind of right into getting ready for Winter Olympics. And it's interesting because I know a lot of people feel like, oh, running is running, and I thought that initially too. But I had to learn how to run in a whole new way. So as a track athlete, you want to spend as little time on the ground as possible. And bobsleigh, because it's power based, it is so much about spending a lot of time on the ground and really creating power through your feet and then transferring it into the sled. So I had to learn how to spend time on the ground, which is like literally the opposite of everything that I learned in track and field. I think what I really kind of put my weight on was just my understanding of how to train hard, my understanding of like how to be a high performance athlete. That's really all those skills or mental skills. That's kind of what I use to help me transition. In the weight room, it was like all power and explosive base. I was barely running, quite honestly. I was more so learning how to do technique. I ended up gaining like 20 pounds, which was like crazy. Yeah. And I was still like one of the lightest girls on the team. It was wild. I was like still so tiny.
Oh my god!
I was working so hard to gain that weight. Like the beautiful thing is, so in track and field, I was pretty strict with my diet. But bobsleigh was like, eat as much food as you want, get seconds, get that cheesecake, get the apple pie, because it was like, put on as much weight as you possibly can right now. And so, but yeah, so I mean, in doing that, a lot of it was just trying to learn technique, just trying to get strong enough. And it was challenging. I think that's where I really learned. One, I was doubting myself a lot. I was comparing myself to the other girls on the team a lot. And this stands out to me a lot because this is, I think, where I really, really understood the power of just focusing on yourself or putting yourself in like a bubble so that you can focus and be disciplined on what you're working towards. I was comparing myself to all the other girls on the team, and my results were like taking a nosedive. And I made the decision to just, I'm not going to compare myself anymore. So I stopped looking at the times I was running in practice. And then I stopped looking at the times that the other girls were running in practice. They used to like give us like a sheet of paper that had everybody's like times that they had run for the day. And I would just be like, no, thank you. Like, I don't want it. And I started to, before I went into practice, it was like, what do I want to feel today? what's going to be my definition of a successful practice, because I took away being able to say the time or being able to look at the time. And after I did that, that's when I really started to see the results that I wanted. So it was just a really clear understanding for me of how comparing yourself to other people can be like detrimental to your ability to perform, and how much just really leaning on your own abilities, and putting yourself in that kind of box of just like, put your head down. In track, I used to say like, put your head down, chop wood and carry water. Like, don't make it complicated, just do the things. And just kind of really, it just showed me how important that is. So yeah, that was a wild journey though. A lot of doubt through a good portion of it. But yeah.
But ended up elevating you in the long run.
Yes.
And then you got to step out of the sled and realize that you won a bronze medal, which is pretty phenomenal.
Right. Yeah, that was awesome.
I love hearing about the like transition. I didn't think about this at all, the difference in track and bobsled being so much of speed versus power. Mm-hmm. Of like, you went from a speed sport of like, I am fast, I am light, I am not touching the ground, all the way to I am exerting as much power out of this ground as I possibly can. You went to like something that was so fundamentally different, but were able to kind of, again, you went back to the very, very simple basics. And I think what I really love hearing from your journey is that it wasn't just like a super easy transition. Yeah. I think that it being a hard transition almost makes the result that you ended up seeing in the long run like that much more special, because of the fact that you had to do some really hard things and really struggle in order to get there. And God, I mean, I have to think about the fact that this is after you've had a really successful career for a long time. Like, that has to be so hard going back and not being at the top anymore.
Girl, my ego was taking the hugest hit. So for the first few World Cups, you go overseas. I wasn't racing, so I was a spare. And to be a spare means I was like bringing the sleds to the starting lines. I was like collecting the girls who was racing clothes. You know what I mean? It was just like very much, I was like, wow, like I'm the number one hurdler in Canada, and I'm here collecting other people's racing gear and like just doing like, you know, all of this like work. And I think that's really when I was in the space where I was like, I'm going to quit because this is silly. Like, I don't want to be here. And I've never had the experience of training really hard for something and not being given the opportunity to compete. Because in track, obviously, you train, you race, you train, you race. And I love competition. Like, that's kind of what feeds me. I wouldn't say I necessarily love training, but I love training because it gives me, you know, the space and freedom to compete. So, man, it was so hard. That was like the most challenging thing. But I also, again, I knew, I was like, if they give me one opportunity to show what I have, that's it. Like, I was like, I'm never going to let anybody come and take my spot. So it was like, I did get one. We were in Eagles, Austria. And I was like, you have to like show out today. Like you got to bring it. And I think I thrive. I always say I love the lights. I thrive in moments of pressure. I thrive in those moments because to me, it's like when you feel that much pressure and in a competition, this is what I loved about competition. It's like, it's so important that you actually can't think. Because if I think, or if I put all these extra stuff into it, I'm going to like not do as well. And so it is really this beautiful moment of like, I'm going to let everything go and I'm going to fully trust myself and I'm just going to do this thing. And I only really ever get to find that in competition. When I'm in practice, I'm the overthinker, I'm the tinkerer, I'm the like, you know, trying to figure all this stuff out. And it's hard for me to let that go. But when it's competition time, it's like, it's go time. I have what I have and I'm going for it. And yeah, I really, once I got that opportunity, and again, I'm so big on like capitalizing on opportunities. So once I got that, I was like, okay. And then I did the next 4 World Cups and I was like, okay, great. I'm happy.
You're like, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, again, like just learning lessons of when I think back to that time, I am proud of the fact that I didn't quit. I'm proud of the fact that I did something super challenging, that I didn't let my ego or the fact that I needed to be the best or the fact that I thought I was so cool deter me away, because I could have stopped and I wouldn't have had a medal at the time if I had allowed myself to kind of give into those types of feelings and the thoughts that I were going through my head. And so I always, people often ask me like, how do you persevere or stay through? But I just think having that bigger goal be so much bigger than whatever's happening in the moment, and just being willing to see it through. So I think for me, it was just like I said, I wanted to go to the Winter Olympics. So you got to finish it, and you got to go right to the end, and let the fact that if I do or don't go not be because I quit. So
Yep.
yeah,
it goes back to even what you were saying of like, you're the one who determines what your fate's going to be. Like, you determine your own destiny. And so if you're determining that you're done, like that's it, you're done. But if you're making that decision, if the external result is that, say hypothetically, you didn't make the Winter Olympics, but you put everything in your power there to do it, you know that you gave your everything. You gave your all. You did the thing that you set yourself out to do. And maybe the result wasn't what you wanted. The result did end up being what you wanted. So that was pretty awesome. But even if it wasn't what you wanted, it would still have meant a lot more than if you would have taken that opportunity away from yourself altogether.
no, for sure. I think one thing I stand on, or I guess maybe a mantra I kind of use, is just like always do your best. And I think it's a really great way to kind of like let that be your judge in a lot of ways, because I often said, like, when I was running, it would be like, I just want to be able to walk away knowing I did everything I could. And to me, that is my success, right? And so, like you were just saying, it's just like, just being able to know I put all my eggs in, I turned every stone over, I did everything I could, let the chips land where they lay. But if I can walk away at the end of the day knowing I did everything I could, I'm good. Like, knowing that was me. I maximized everything I had, with my circumstances, with my talent, with my support. That was everything that I could do. So I think using that as a definition of success is super powerful. And also understanding that always do your best changes from day to day, right? So some days my best is amazing and I'm like killing it. And some days my best is like, I'm gonna get like 2 or 3 runs in and then I'm done. But if I know that if I can be genuinely clear and confident in the fact that that is my best for the day, then that's great. And the more days you can stack up of, I did my best, I did my best, I did my best. I think that's what leads to those, the big celebrations that we all want.
I love it. It's so special. And again, like, you did your best, your best, your best. That's all that you can do. And I think that it's a really cool thing that's the thing that grounds you. And that's the mantra that you follow of like, you're going to put your best foot forward no matter what, because of the fact that it's the most that you can do, but it's everything. It's giving your everything. I love that you talk about like how in practices, how you're the one who will toy and tinker, and practice doesn't always really feel good. And then competition is when you really get to hone in. I'm super similar in that way, where I'm like, practice does not always feel great to me, where practice might feel the worst, but I know that I'm going to be able to be the best in a game, in a competition sense. And so I think that that's really cool for you, of getting to toy and tinker, getting to know that like putting your best in is where your priority lies, because of the fact that if you're able to do all the work behind the scenes, then your best foot forward is going to be your absolute best foot forward.
No, I love that. Yeah, for me, and it kind of feels like this is like with you too, is like I'm very reflective. And so I like to kind of like, as I'm in practice, I'm trying to find the spaces where I could get better, right? So you can't just let it flow, because if you just let it flow in practice all the time, you're not kind of pushing yourself to where you need to be, right? And so I'm always looking for that. And again, like being super in tune with my body. So I feel like my awareness or my like mind is super open and working a lot when I'm in practice. But like I said, like competition is like go time. Like you just let all of it go. And then I always just choose days where I'm like, okay, today's not a tinkering day. I'm gonna just chill today and like let practice happen, right? Because it's just like it can be too much. But yeah, I think anytime you're kind of like devoted to the like perfection of your craft, you have to kind of like let yourself be in those kind of uncomfortable spaces. So
It's cool. And speaking of uncomfortable spaces, I'm like, I'm jumping back. I look at like the discomfort of the places that you've been through, of all of the journeys. And I want to look at like a comfort or an excitement moment. And I want to hear from you the emotions of being named to an Olympic roster. And I think that there had to be some differences in all 3 Olympic roster namings.
yeah.
Because your first one, we go back to the origins of this conversation of how you were talking about your first Olympics always means the most. So being named to that roster the first time, what did it feel like? What did it feel like the second time when you earned it for Rio? And then the third was like also a first for you, I feel like.
Yeah.
And so all 3 of those emotions, I'm guessing, were probably a little bit different, but I'd love to hear just the emotions leading up to following roster naming. What does it feel like to be named to an Olympic roster?
Right. You know what's funny? The moments that stand out to me in my career aren't necessarily the moments people would think. So my first Olympics, when I knew I made the team in the hurdles, it actually wasn't such a spectacular moment. And I think it's interesting because I guess maybe I should give the backstory, where it's kind of like I was having this like breakout year. And the moment that actually was probably the most impactful was when I ran standard. And you know what I mean? I ran standard and I was like, oh my goodness, like this could really happen now. And it was my first time. So breaking 13 seconds in the 100-meter hurdles is kind of like puts you in elite territory. And that was the moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I kind of felt like I arrived. At nationals, you have to come top 3 to make your first Olympic team. I ended up running the 100 meters the day before. So technically, I actually qualified for the Olympics in the 100 the day before. They did like a little ceremony, gave me the little flag. So I guess that might have like taken away some of the moment from the hurdles. Because then once you know what I mean? It was like once I made the hurdle team, I was like, well, yeah, I already know I'm going to the Olympics.
Yep.
And I think as athletes, we're so weird. I think once you kind of like cross the barrier. So like I said, I ran standard and I was very aware of like, oh, I can do this. And it almost kind of fizzled away the like, the moment, because I feel like I was like, I expected it. I'm not to sound any type of way, but I was like, I expected to make that team at that point. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting. I definitely, and I went into nationals like super confident, and I was more so like getting to the Olympics was that now the moment that felt super big. So yeah, I think it's just interesting, the moments. It was more so when I ran standard, or if I ran like a time that I thought I couldn't run. It's almost like when I surprised myself. I should say that. It's when I surprised myself. Those are the moments that really stand out to me. So the times, every time I broke a barrier, my first time running under 14 seconds in the hurdles, I remember it clearly. My first time running under 13 seconds. And it's almost like that running when I ran 13.8 felt so huge to me, maybe even more than times where I ran faster, but I had been running that time for like a long time, you know? My second time going to Rio, it's interesting. In hindsight, I really realized that my experience in Rio wasn't what I would have wanted it to be. I was having this amazing year, the most consistent I had ever been. And this is probably the first time I had put a lot of pressure on myself. And I put a lot of pressure on myself because in my mind, it was like, okay, you've been to one Olympics, now you're going to your second, you have to win a medal. Like that was the like voice in my head. You have to win a medal here. You've done this before. You've already been in a final. The next step to take is a medal. And before every, I guess, thing I had always accomplished, it came from a place of my fire, or it came from a place of like possibility. I'm excited about doing this thing, right? This was the first time I was like, it was pressure. It was like, you have to. And I made the final, and I remember standing at the starting line and being so scared, quite honestly. Like, if I compare standing at the starting line in London, it was like, oh my gosh, I got this opportunity in front of me. I was so excited. I was like, I'm going to like do this. And I remember standing at the starting line in Rio and feeling like, very scared. And I was like, it was almost like, I hope I do well. and I only see that in hindsight now, being able to compare and take that kind of like broader spectrum look. And maybe I kind of learned from that, because when I went into, bobsleigh, again, I opened myself up again to that feeling of like, I get to do this. I get to be here. This is an opportunity. This is a possibility for me. And not the pressure, because it's so hard to bring out your best when you put that level of pressure on yourself.
I'm like trying to find words. You've made me a little speechless with that, just the talk of like, I get to do this, of the special, like when you surprise yourself how special they are. It's so awesome. Like I'm literally almost at a loss for words of like hearing how this journey, how all of them it's been a different journey of like battling through expectations, managing those things, like learning to really find the joy in the moment instead of taking away the fact that what you're doing is an incredible thing. I think it's pretty special to get to do that on the third journey too, of like, hey, reminder that this thing that I'm doing, I get to be here, I get to be present, and I get to go for this opportunity. It's not that I need to, it's that I get to. And it's really cool. I love that it doesn't stand out to you, the fact when you were named to that roster. Like, I know you were saying it, I was just like smiling. I'm like, that is so, I love that, because it means that the moments, it just means that the moments that surprise you and the ones that stand out to you, like stand out to you that much more, because those are the special ones. And like, yes, whatever, being named to an Olympic roster, it's so funny. I like just totally downplay the fact, like, oh, being named to an Olympic roster, it's not to downplay that moment, but it's just that there were other ones that were more special to you, that are way more instrumental and like valuable to your career and your memories. And I think that I love that there's that value of like, I surprised myself. I ran sub 13, like, whoa, I've hit the standard of elite. Like it just becomes so cool.
You gotta realize again, like success is really, it is your own definition. And that's kind of what I realized. A lot of the moments that I was told I should care about weren't necessarily the moments that I did care about, or didn't elicit that kind of feeling inside of me. So, and it's actually interesting because that race in 2012, there were 6 other girls that had standard. And so it was really competitive. One of the most competitive races like in like Canadian history to date. I loved being a part of that race. I love when people come up to me now and talk about the fact of like, that was so cool that all of you guys were like had standard and we didn't know who's going to make the team, and how competitive it was. So it was less, even that moment was less about the fact that I made this team. It was more about like, I went out and I competed really hard, and I was in this space with other women who were great, and we put on an amazing show for people. Like, that's the thing that I loved about that moment. And then I happened to have made an Olympic team in the process.
It was the cherry on top, but
yeah.
It was the icing on the cake. It wasn't necessarily the cake. It wasn't the bake. It was the added bonus to it was making that roster. But like the fact that you were a part of history is so cool. I mean, six running at standard and making it is such a cherry on top, because it's special. Like, getting to that standard is special, and so it's fun. I love that you're able to look back and be like, this was such an incredible thing to have been a part of.
Yeah.
It really like talks to your history as an athlete, and as like in your career. It's like you've kind of built this history of defining moments for yourself that really stand out, and that some of them are defining moments for Team Canada as well, which is pretty special, of that you've kind of gotten to span your career of like setting like little historical milestones.
No, it's awesome. I think it's just like, you get to understand that you get to those moments again. I guess maybe this is like, I'm really realizing I am such big on like, it's inner, what feels good to me, I'm driving it, but you get to define what those moments are, or those moments are special because they're for you. But I'm actually interested, if I can ask you a question about moments that you had, because you were talking about like feeling surprised as well. Is there a moment that stands out for you where you're like, oh, I surprised myself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I like laugh because you actually are asking this at a really great time, because I had a very specific, it's funny because it's less about like wins. It's the same thing that you were just talking about of like, it's less about being named to the roster. It's more about this one specific moment. Like for me, it's less about like wins and losses in tournaments, and it's more about specific plays that I remember, or like specific moments where I can feel the fire rise, and like instead of letting it overtake me, I let it highlight me. Of like, I have a very specific 4 days ago for me that this happened of, I've been working on just working on my speed up to the net, making sure that I'm jumping. It was super jumpy sand at a tournament that I was playing in. And I am a top spin server, which for people who don't know volleyball, it means that I'm basically taking a little bit more of an aggressive approach when I'm serving at the back end line. And I'm a blocker. I run up to the net from when I'm serving. And so it is serve, sprint to the net, and get ready for the play to come. And I had an opportunity, which doesn't very often happen, where you get an overpass as a server, and you get to take it and take a hit off of the overpass. But the girl receiving my serve overpassed it just at the right height for me to come in and take a step close and hit the ball. And it was like a career highlight moment where I felt like I had jumped 40 inches in the air and I hit the ball on the 10-foot line at the deepest. Like it was one of the, I say it's like a career highlight moment, because I've like smiled thinking it, because I'm like, I can't believe I did that. That's so cool. I don't know if it would have looked as cool to the outside view, but people definitely told me it was a spectacular play. And so like, that's like a career highlight moment for me. And I think there's also moments where it's like going back to the whole tinkering idea that you were talking about in practice, of things that really make me uncomfortable. I'm a blocker, and blocking is like the hardest thing in the world. In my opinion, it's one of the hardest things in sport, because it's so much less dependent on what you're doing. And it's like one of the only things in volleyball where you have to be like aggressive and reactionary at the same time. And you have like a half second to react as well, because you're from like between 2 and 5 feet away from the player who's hitting it at you. And I've been working on this new like blocking philosophy for a while, and had a breakthrough in a practice like the day before I went to a tournament. And the day that the tournament started, we had like a horrible first game, barely squeaked out a win, and we're going for like a deciding match to determine where we were seeded into playoffs. And my block, it clicked that game. And I remember the feeling of it clicking. And it was the most rewarding thing ever. I think I had like between 8 and 10 terminal blocks in a match, which a normal amount is like 3 blocks in a match is really, really good. And so it was like the best blocking game of my entire life. And I'm like, it makes me smile so much, because I look back and I'm like, I worked so hard on this one skill, and it finally clicked. And it clicked. It didn't just click, like it switched all the way on and went firing, like not immediately, but just in that game. And so it was one of those special moments where it felt like everything that I put in was finally coming to fruition. So those are 2 moments that stand out like very significantly in a more recent sense. Like there's other wins and losses that come along the road that make me really happy, but those are specific like execution based things that they live rent free in my head right now for sure.
I love that. No, I can feel like how excited you are about that. Like I'm feeding off of that. That's great. You're beaming ear to ear. It's interesting because I talk a lot about sometimes about like feeling magic. And to me that feels like a moment like that, where it's like the one in practice where it's like, oh my gosh, it happened. And then I actually think it's actually so wild to then do it multiple times after that, where you're like, oh no, I got this now, you know? And it's interesting because maybe, and you just made me think about it, it's like it's maybe those moments of transformation where it's like you passed a barrier that was there for you. You know what I mean? Where you're like, okay, I have this thing. It's kind of like maybe a bit of my ceiling right now. And that moment in practice is that like, it feels like magic because you can feel that like transformation onto this other side of who you are. And then to use it multiple times is so super cool. I love that. That's great.
Yeah. It's you hit the nail on the head with this. Like there was a ceiling, but like it's not even feeling like the ceiling breaking. It's feeling the ceiling rising. And I think that's something that I love about sport. I've been very fortunate to not really ever feel like I've fully hit a ceiling, but I've definitely felt it rise, of where there were things that I definitely have doubted myself in execution, And this probably goes back, like, I think what we've talked about a lot for your bobsledding stuff is like, you're like on the verge of quitting. You're like, this is something that I'm not getting past. And there are certain things that I'm like, okay, self-doubt. I'm like not as big as some of the blockers out there now. It's like, I laugh because I'm 6'1". Like I'm not a small individual.
Yeah.
Not small, but like emphasis on not being a small person, but smaller than some other blockers that are out there right now. And so it's like, oh, is my ceiling that you can't teach height? And then it's like, or I just learned to be more efficient with the moves and faster and jump a little higher, put in the work in the gym, like doing those little things. And so the ceiling's never quite been hit. And I love when you were talking about that of like your ceiling's risen, like you set the standard. Now let's go a little bit above that. Like you've qualified for the Olympics. Let's go to a final. It's like always kind of looking to raise that ceiling in sport. I love it.
Yeah, I love it. For you, I'm kind of curious. It's funny because I was like a really tall hurdler, and they always told me that was a negative for me. But it's just kind of this idea around like, okay, this is what I have to work with. So how can this be the thing that makes me great, as opposed to the thing that you think is going to be my hindrance is the thing that I'm going to show you is why I'm going to be great at what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this to make me even better. And I love, literally, I'm stealing this from now on. So the idea around like, expanding my ceiling. Like when you said that, the feeling that I got was like, let's say like your ceiling is here and you just kind of feel like it's almost like you expand and you give yourself more space. And then like I said, that's being inspired by the space in between. So it's kind of like now I have like more room to like move towards something even bigger. Right.
Absolutely.
And it almost makes me think that like when we're in challenging times, maybe we're just so close, cause like that's why it feels challenging, because you're so close to your ceiling. So it's like you have like that push and pull because you're right there, right? I love that. I love thinking of it like this way now. It's like if I'm in a challenge, it's because I am knocking on the door of where my current boundary is, and it's it's to push it out more so that I have even more room to work with and a new thing to go towards. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Oh, thank you.
That's good.
I love it. I love that I can share, because I'm stealing all your mantras like for like going into competitions and just being able to put the best foot forward. It's like it's something that I love, and for all our listeners, I hope that you love this as much as I do. Is that I feel like I'm gaining so much from having you on and having our other athletes that have come on and joined. It's like the mutual inspiration from one another. It goes back to what you were talking about of like your two best friends from college. They were on paper better than you, and you let them elevate you. Or the racers that you're going against in Olympics, like they're motivating you. And so being surrounded and being able to listen and hear philosophies from so many incredible athletes, so many incredible women of what drives them to succeed and elevate is so special. And I think attributes so much to a lot of progress that I've been able to make in my career on and off the court. And I hope it's attributing to people who are listening to their successes on and off their playing fields as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's always so much to gain from the way somebody thinks about something. And then, yeah, you just take whatever resonates with you, what hits you to your core. So, yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing and taking the time. I know that we're coming near the edge of our time here, but I'm just like feeling such an abundance of gratitude for getting to share this space and getting to share like so much of the mental journey side of it as well. It's a really special thing that I've gotten to not just learn from you, but hear and smile and, bring me to tears. Yeah. 5 minutes into the episode. It doesn't get to happen very often, but
no, I love that. I love it. It's funny. So I write a lot as well. That's part of my like new creative side. But I write from such an emotional space, so it's like it just pours out of me sometimes.
I love it.
So yeah,
it goes back again. It's like it's the raw emotions of it all, and you even said it with the creative side. It's like there is so much raw emotion in sport that you get to see a lot of the good, but like not everybody gets to see all of the raw, because there are things that we innately hide as athletes that we don't even necessarily realize we're hiding, but that we do. And it just happens.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. I think sport, what I loved about it, it was this place that I got to play and express the fullness of myself. I'm in the weight room, I'm throwing weights, I'm screaming. Like I have a photo of me crossing the finish line and I'm literally like screaming as I'm crossing the finish line. And
I
I just
love
think
that.
there's not a lot of places that gives you the freedom, to just be like, whatever's here in this moment is coming out. And I'm going to use all of me to make this happen. So it's super cool. And I thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I think you guys are awesome. So this is great.
I'm so grateful that we've had the time to do this today. I think all that I have left for you is one last little series of questions, which I think are one of the most fun parts of this. I've had a lot of fun just hearing everything, but for our listeners tuning in, you know what time it is. It is time for our Strong Girls United series questions. For our newbies listening for the first time, Strong Girls United, as we've talked about, we're a nonprofit who work to supply girls with mental skills tools through sports mentorship, mental skills training. And we do it based off our 3 pillars of our nonprofit. And our 3 pillars of our nonprofit are strong bodies, kind hearts, and unstoppable minds. And so, Phylicia, I have our 3 Strong Girls United series questions following our nonprofit's pillars. And so I'm going to cue us off here and start by asking, how do you keep your body strong?
I keep my body strong by eating well, drinking lots of water, and lifting weights and speaking kindly to it.
I love it. Now, number 2, how do you keep your heart kind?
Oh, well, I kind of got that a little bit too. How do I keep my heart kind? I think I keep my heart kind, again, like, as I kind of spoke about, like always trying to find a different perspective. When I'm in challenging moments, I'm always looking for, or I'm dealing with someone who I might find challenging. I'm always looking for the other perspective. How can I see it from their eyes, as opposed to just reacting to whatever might be going on in the situation. So yeah.
Amazing. And last, but most certainly not least, how do you keep your mind unstoppable?
I keep my mind unstoppable by keeping it connected to my fire, believing in myself, and I think just working with that mantra of like always trying to do my best.
I love it. It's so special. And I love that you talked about this in the beginning. I love that you personify your fire. Like she's in there.
Yeah.
It's so
I also
incredible.
personify my like inner critic. Her name is Shirley. So fire, yeah. So my fire, her name is Fire. It's Phyre. And my inner critic's name is Shirley, and she is like an old grandma. Like you love her to death, but she also like a little outdated and just be saying crazy stuff. So I also have her, when she's like, "Oh my gosh, don't do that. It's gonna you're gonna get hurt." I'm like, "Okay, Shirley." So I love. You can talk to them.
Okay,
and just
Shirley,
let them know.
I love that so much. Well, for everybody who's been listening, Phylicia, thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope for everybody listening, you learn to embrace your fire and don't let Shirley get to you too much.
Awesome. Thank you.
For everybody tuning in, thank you for joining. I'm your host, Charlie Ekstrom, and we are signing off. Thank you for taking the time to join us today on Strong Girls Pod. In the spirit of growing community and inspiring strong girls and women everywhere, please subscribe, rate, and leave a comment about our podcast. Tell your friends, family, really everyone to listen in and enjoy. This podcast is sponsored by Strong Girls United, a nonprofit with a mission to empower girls to be strong, confident, and resilient through sports mentorship and mental health programming. Visit sgunitedfoundation.org to learn more on how you can get involved today.